Okay, we're talking about Article 10, the Lord's Supper. The issue is, in one sense, very complicated, but I can also tell you that this is a historical disagreement that has less importance today. So let me give you the technical problem. At the time of the Reformation, there were essentially two kinds of people that Luther and his ilk were arguing. The Catholics believed in something called transubstantiation. That means that the bread and the wine actually become the body and blood of Christ, but they do not change their appearance. That was their belief. So when he says, "This is my body," they take that literally. It becomes his body, but they don't, I'm not sure where they got this in the Bible. In fact, I know they didn't get it in the Bible. That for some reason, it doesn't change form. It still looks like bread and wine, but it actually is. At the other end of the spectrum are the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists believe that the whole discussion of "this is my body and this is my blood" is a memorial. It is like a metaphor. Yeah. Sorry, you said it's not symbolic?
No, is it symbolic?
It is symbolic. Well, you gotta be careful how we use these words and make sure we define them, but they said it doesn't become, he's not real, the body and blood aren't there. We are remembering his body and blood. We are remembering his sacrifice on the cross. It has no real effect. Okay. So we have the memorialists or the symbolic folks at one end of the spectrum. We've got the Catholics at the other end of the spectrum who talk about this thing that they invented, transubstantiation, where the body and blood actually happen. So where are the
DNA testing?
Yeah, that's right. Good point. So where are the Lutherans? The Lutherans, I'm arguing, are in that spectrum. I would say they are closer to the Catholic end than the Anabaptist end, but the word we use is real presence. Jesus is really present, or it's also true presence. Sorry, the old word is truly present. Now, so what exactly are we saying? We are saying that Jesus is present in the elements. The elements don't change. They even, well, I'm gonna read it next, but that's it. So we say he is there, but we don't go as far as the Catholics and say that the bread and the wine actually change. They are still bread and wine from our perspective. Now, so let me go ahead and read it, and then we can go a little further. The Lord's Supper. Of the supper of the Lord, they teach. Remember, the "they" just means Lutherans. Lutherans teach that the body and blood of Christ are truly present and are distributed to those who eat the supper, and they reject those that teach otherwise. This is one of the shortest confessions. Okay, so the gist of it is Jesus is present, and we reject anybody who teaches otherwise. Now, as I said, we've We could talk about the Catholic position. We could talk about the Anabaptist position. I went looking for some other description, other ways of describing this whole subject. I read some Calvinist pages this week. I don't normally read much of Calvin, but I know for a fact that Luther and Calvin were not friendly on this point. It got animated between them. But I read the Calvin language and I read the Lutheran language, and I can't tell the difference. Now, I'm not a theologian, so maybe a theologian would be able to point to me right there. It was that word that you
But
missed.
they disagreed somewhere.
They disagreed, and so the Calvinists are wrong and condemned because of this, and they condemned the Lutherans. So that's the beginning of my discussion. How much does it matter today? It mattered back then. The Lutherans condemn. Notice it says, reject those that teach otherwise. Okay. So the Lutherans condemn the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists condemn the Lutherans, and of course the Catholics. And so for probably 300 or 400 years, maybe more, closer to 500 years, that there was serious disagreement here about what's going on. Now, let me come forward to today. During the 20th century, during a period of ecumenism, the Lutherans reached agreement with a number of churches, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, Methodists, I don't know who all else, Moravians. And so basically what we've agreed to say is, we're not changing our old language. We didn't go back and edit this. We still believe that, okay? Or we teach that. But that shouldn't stop us from communing with a Methodist or an Episcopalian or a Reformed. And I talked to the pastor this morning, and actually it's even more serious than that. We have what's called altar fellowship. Pastor Mentzer, he's ordained in the Lutheran Church. He can be called as the pastor of a Methodist church or a Presbyterian or Episcopalian, Moravian. I don't know how many I could list there, but we have that's called altar fellowship. So we've agreed officially that this no longer really should divide us. It might be a way to describe us if you wanted to lay out all the differences between how does a Methodist look at it and how does an Episcopalian and a Lutheran. There would be differences in our language, but that's just a descriptor. It doesn't really apply to today. I think that's what the situation is as of now. But let's get into the actual language, and we can decide how we can talk about the history some more, or we can talk about the current theology situation. It starts in Matthew chapter 26. This is the story of the Last Supper or the Lord's Supper. And these are also the words that are picked up in what's known as the words of institution. I just was reminded, we talked about this last week. Some of you weren't here though. Remember in the last several weeks, the Catholic Church got themselves in trouble with that one priest who's using the language incorrectly.
Yeah, we baptize.
He has been saying for 30 years we baptize you. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's the only place, but that's the question. He's supposed to say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He's been saying we. Now, to the extent that,
Was it a royal we or which we was it?
well, that it doesn't matter. In the Catholic Church, not in the Lutheran Church, in the Catholic Church, the priest is acting in the place of Jesus. So what he's supposed to say is, I baptize. Jesus baptizes you. To say we is a little bit too Protestant, because that's like what that is saying is the church baptizes you. We would not be offended by that language. Catholic Church is. And what the Catholic Church has initially said, which I can't believe I would think some priest would just wave a magic wand and make this, I'm sorry, some bishop, or even the Pope, just say, no, calm down. It doesn't matter. Because what they're saying is every sacrament that this priest has administered is false. That includes all the marriages. So all those marriages are null and void. So all those children are bastards. Picture this. All the last rites that this guy has administered for 30 years.
I think confirmation is a sacrament.
Well, yes, but that just means they're not Christians, right? But the dead, all the dead are now condemned to hell.
Right.
Because they were not forgiven on their deathbeds. They all go to hell instead of go to heaven. Now, we don't believe that, but the Catholics believe it. So all their marriages are null and void, all their deaths, all those loved ones go to hell. I don't know. Anyway, we also have formulas, but we don't concentrate on them in the same way. But notice whenever the pastor speaks at communion, he picks up language from this Matthew chapter 26. Now, this is not exactly what you see there, but the pastor always begins like this. On the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread. After giving thanks, he broke it. Okay? So they fill in a little bit more language to describe what this is, but what he's saying is, the pastor is saying, is picture the setting. It's Thursday night of Holy Week. Jesus is at the Last Supper, and he does these things. Now, that's what this Matthew 26 is. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body." It turns out that it's a coincidence only, but I'm at exactly the same place in my teaching up in the fellowship. We're going through the Gospel of Mark, and so this is exactly where we are. And I pointed out to the group this morning that this language we are so used to it. We've heard it for 2,000 years. So for us, it is not surprising language. But picture a Jew who has heard the Passover meal celebrated every year of their life. The Jews had a script. The parent or the leader
I've been to a Seder, that's what.
Yeah, and then there's you go through a step-by-step process, and so you know exactly what to expect. And so here's Jesus. We don't know exactly which cup we're talking about, but in a Seder there are 4 cups, so it could be really any of them. The only hint we get here in Matthew is while they were eating. So, I mean, they could be anywhere in the meal, but it doesn't matter. The other disciples are used to somebody at some point picking up a cup and then reading the script. This is the cup of deliverance, when our people came out of Egypt, for example, is one. The scripts were known. And for Jesus to say, well, in this case, he takes the bread, take and eat, this is my body. Take and drink, this is my blood. This would be very offensive language. So I asked the folks this morning in the fellowship, imagine during a communion service, you come up to the altar to get your bread and wine, and the pastor says, do you want jelly on that? Or, do you peanut butter?
Yeah.
We would say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's
It's
you're making light of something that should not be made light of. And so I only give that example because that's what have been in the ears of these disciples. They have heard this done exactly the same way every year of their life. And suddenly Jesus is taking this bread and wine and saying, this is my body, this is my blood. This is weird stuff. Anyway, let's get to the actual sentence that I asked Tim to expound on. Notice verse 27 and 28. He takes the cup, he gives thanks, he offers them, says, drink from it, all of you. And here's the language. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Now, as I say there in the text, you can also find this similar language in Mark chapter 14 and Luke chapter 22. John, for some reason, doesn't actually have language about the Last Supper in his, about communion in his gospel. So you can find this very similar language in 3 places. So that line, this is my blood of the covenant, is what prompted me to ask Tim, because I know Tim likes to teach on this exact point. What's going on there? What is this covenant? And so I'm going to swap the share and find Tim's, Tim's note. Here it is. Let me change to Tim's note. Here it is. Okay, the point is, the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, in essence. People had to give, this is Tim's sense of humor is playing through here. In the Old Covenant, if you were a good Jew, it was your responsibility to develop a sacrifice every year. You would, if you were a farmer, you would raise a lamb or a goat. If you were wealthier, very wealthy, it could be an ox. Okay. If you were very poor, couldn't even afford a lamb, then it was a couple birds. They were called doves. Okay. But no matter what, it was your responsibility as a good Jew to create your sacrifice and then get that sacrifice to the temple where you would have it offered on your behalf. And in that process, that animal's blood would replace your blood, because remember, the wages of sin is death. So something has to die, and this animal dies, the blood is spilled, and you are forgiven. The problem is, it's only temporary. You are forgiven till next year. You got to do the whole thing over again.
It's like a booster shot.
It's like a COVID booster shot. Very good, yes. For forever and ever now, we're going to have these darn COVID booster shots. Well, that's what basically temple worship looked like. That's the blood of the old covenant. Okay. God promised his people that he would overlook their sins. He doesn't really, forgive is the right word, but it's not the same sense that the Christian is forgiven. It's more like the picture is the sins are covered by the blood, so you can't see them. It's like you paint over the sins with the blood. The sins are still there, you just can't see them anymore. Anyway, that's the old covenant that Tim is talking about in this document. And notice Tim's analysis here. He says, it was a good plan, if I can be so bold. So he's giving God a good grade,
Yeah.
I guess. The point is, God says that sin brings a penalty, so a penalty must be paid. And in this case, it's the lamb. The lamb pays the penalty. It works. The problem is it's temporary. Tim discusses that in more detail. He goes into a little bit of he doesn't spend a lot of time on it, but the temple worship was an awful mess. Literally an awful mess. It was a slaughterhouse. They had built into the construction basically sewer pipes, because there was so much blood being produced at the altar that it had to go somewhere. So it went down through the floor, out through the sidewall. You know that valley called Kidron, where the smoldering junk of the town was? That's where the blood ended up. It wasn't otherwise used in worship. Basically, it was. Go ahead.
Where was McDonald's?
What?
Where was the
McDonald's?
McDonald's?
Where was the McDonald's? I'm not sure. Are you suggesting that they produce as in a slaughterhouse?
If it's as bloody as you say, we don't see any of that. Not anymore.
Oh. Well, okay, fair enough. Okay, not just McDonald's. We okay. I think these are questions we just don't ask. Unless we're vegetarians here.
Yeah.
We eat meat.
Yeah.
And the same process occurs.
Yeah.
If you slaughter thousands of animals,
Yeah.
there's thousands of animals worth of blood and bones and skins, and we don't
Most
have.
people today only think of a styrofoam plate.
That's right.
with saran wrap.
Yes. It's very clean, comes under plastic, very nice, yes. Anyway, Tim's point is the new covenant pays respect to the old covenant. It is still blood. It is still the blood of a sacrifice. But because of the main difference, well, I guess he's discussing it here. We've got a perfect sacrifice. Jesus is a perfect lamb. And the sins are actually forgiven. They aren't just covered over. They are gone.
And Doug, I think a key point here when Tim refers to Hebrews 9, verse 22, that forgiveness is the key word. Jesus is our mediator with God, that all must pass before we are judged by God. Without Christ, there is no forgiveness and everlasting life.
Right. And Jesus is willing to apply his sacrifice to anyone who acknowledges this forgiveness. That's all it is. We don't have to spend the year creating the sacrifice, developing the lamb, or even purchasing a lamb. We don't have to purchase the lamb if we're not a farmer. Instead, we are given forgiveness. Jesus
That's
offers
good
it.
news.
Yes, that is the good news. So this is Tim's contribution, because we let me go back to our document that we were working on. Okay, change this document again to this one. Notice the language in the 1 Corinthians. This sounds a little bit more like what the pastor says. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread. When he had given thanks, he broke it. This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. While we're on that sentence, notice this is where the Anabaptists get their language about memorial. Notice it does say this in remembrance of me. So we can, one reason why I think we've decided to stop fighting with each other is we can all point to, look right there. There's the language. Well, here's the language that the Anabaptists point to. They say, it does say remembrance of me. And then we turn around and point to the sentence before it, but notice it does say, this is my body. Now, we say that, QED, end of proof. This is my body. But others can say just as clearly, well,
I quickly Googled the Calvin Luther position, and they were talking about different presences.
yes, but they both use the term real presence. That's why
they distinguish between different kinds of presence.
Okay, well, let me give you one.
The Calvin position, well, since Christ is present in heaven, he can't be present.
It's exactly it. It turns out that the issue really, I don't think, was about communion. It was from a greater understanding of what does it mean for Christ to be one Christ, God and man, okay? We know that, God and man, and he has ascended into heaven. Okay, so this God and man is now in heaven. Okay. Can he be here with us right now? We say, remember, we're told wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, he promises to be here. So he's here. We believe that, okay? But we don't see him.
To add that, Doug, service of communion in my notes, the elements are explained. They point to Jesus' physical incarnation, his sacrificial death, his resurrection, and the coming kingdom.
Yes, but I'm sorry, what are you reading from? I'm sorry, Bill.
My notes on the service of communion, the elements, this is my body, this is my blood, are explained. The point to Jesus' physical incarnation, his sacrificial death, his resurrection, and coming kingdom.
Yes, but I think you're reading from an Anabaptist interpretation. They're saying that this is all symbolic of those things. We say Jesus is really present. Like I was just discussing here, we're sitting here in a room. You and Pat are virtually joining this room. So my question is Jesus present in this space?
We say.
I think we believe he is physically, well, I shouldn't use the word physical. He is really, you use that word, really present, but we agree we don't reach out and touch him. He's not, we don't see him here. He's not casting a shadow. Okay, so then the question is, well, then in what sense is he present? Is he here? Is he here? And this is where the Lutherans and the Calvinists battle. Is he here only in his divine sense?
Yeah.
God and man. So it's the God part. And Luther throws up his hands and says, no, you never divide the Christ. Never divide the Christ. Christ is God and man. So don't talk to me about he can only be here in his God part. That would divide the Christ. And this is where I think Calvin and Luther banged heads, because Luther was insisting one Christ, God and man. Calvin would be willing to talk about only in a spiritual sense. So yes, Christ is here in a spiritual sense. And Luther liked the idea of real presence. Now, the next step is to argue then, okay, well, what about communion? How is he present in the communion? We say, and this is where I know a lot of people in Lutheran churches don't understand this. We say he is really present, God and man. Now, we can't see him. I agree with this. We don't see a shadow, but he is really there in the elements. And so it is correct to say, when we eat the bread and the wine, we consume the Christ. We don't usually focus on this, but it's what we believe. The Calvinists probably would say, in a spiritual sense, but not in a physical sense. Okay. The Catholics would say definitely you consume body and blood. The Anabaptists would say no, there's nothing like that at all going on. So you're just doing something because God told you to do it. Jesus tells you to do this, so we do it. That's as a remembrance.
I think when we go to heaven, we'll find out what it is.
Well, we, as I said, we have agreed that this is not a critical issue. It shouldn't stop us from communing. Now, there are people who disagree with that. Just to remind you, if you go to a Catholic church, you are not welcome at their table.
Right. Unless you-
If you go to a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, that's kind of a fundamentalist Lutheran group.
Okay.
They have what's called closed communion. If you're not a member of their parish, well, they may commune you, but you would at least have to meet with the pastor before the service. And he would be interested in your theology. Not just, are you a Christian? No, he wants to know. He wants to know, are you a Lutheran in line with stuff like this? And you believe in the true presence of the Christ in the worship? Most people say, I don't even know what you're talking about. So anyway.
If they attend this class, it's all about education.
Well, they would be less likely even to come. If a Missouri Synod person were to be visiting Lancaster, they might come to our church on a Sunday morning, but it's not likely, because they are taught that we are liberals and we are off the deep end. So they would probably not even come to us. They would look around in their phone book to find a Missouri Synod church.
Are there any in Lancaster?
There's one right near my house,
Oh, wow.
on Petersburg Road. You know where the park is?
Yeah.
Across the street from the park, kind of.
Okay.
There's a
Used to be one in town too.
I don't know. Maybe they moved out there. They've been out there for years. Anyway,
Oh, that's how Missouri Synod.
Missouri Synod.
I've driven by that forever.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their seminary is called Concordia.
Yes, yes, yes. And by the way, I'm on their website all the time. One thing I like about them is they're clear on the theology. So if you want to look up stuff like this, what is real presence? Their site is going to be much easier to find the answer. They connect to the Lutheran confessions, and they say what they believe. The fact that they wouldn't worship with me isn't very nice, but that's
I've only seen the word Lutheran on it, but there's more to it, and I need to read.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lutheran Church, Missouri
Does
Synod.
it say Concordia or Missouri Compromise?
No, it probably says Missouri Synod.
Missouri
Concor-
Synod.
Concordia is just their is the name of their seminary.
Okay.
But referencing this Concord.
The word Concord.
Yeah.
Yes.
I grew up in a Missouri City church.
Did you?
And where was
My wife did too.
Philadelphia.
Philly?
Yeah. It is just a very, I use the term conservative. It's conservative in their theology, but they may appear to you to be more Catholic in their worship. They like bells and whistles. They like incense and they don't all. I mean, they seem to celebrate a higher level of liturgy. Communion at every service, for example, is a common thing.
That's a Catholic.
That's Catholic, right now. But they would, anyway, okay. Here's that reference to Hebrews 9:22. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Yes. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many people, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation. So in the second coming of Christ, we are expecting not another cross. The cross is done. We are forgiven, but now we're being taken to heaven. Okay, let me, on this document that I gave
So if
you.
we die now, we're not saved. There's no salvation until the second coming.
No. You're reading that wrong.
Yeah.
Where is that reference you're trying to? Which?
Well, in Hebrews 28. Not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting.
Oh, okay. It's a good point. Notice that Hebrews 9:28 refers to the last clause to bring salvation to those who are waiting. This is a I gotta get my words careful here. There are two ways that we are saved. I don't know if I want to use the word ways, but remember the thief on the cross was told, today you will be with me in paradise.
Yeah.
Today you will be with me in paradise. So we would all agree Jesus is able to say, this guy is saved, right? He just did it. Okay, done. But notice the emphasis on the word today. Then you look at the whole book of Revelation, and we see the second coming of Christ presented there, and the resurrection of the dead happens in the book of Revelation in the future. So which is it? Are we saved today, or are we saved in the future when the dead are resurrected and they are called by Christ, and that we're all worshiping around the throne like in the book of Revelation?
Yeah.
And the answer is both. I don't understand how this thief on the cross can be saved and somehow his body is raised in some future resurrection, and we celebrate around the great white throne in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
We just believe both things. So it's okay to tell a grieving parent that their child is with Christ. That is correct. But it's also correct to say we look forward to the resurrection where all things will be made right. So honestly, the church teaches both. You can find scripture for both. And so I think what you're seeing here is that idea of waiting. The dead are in the ground waiting. Now, honestly, that seems kind of bleak. We wouldn't say that to a person who's just lost a loved one.
Yeah. Wait sometime in the future and they'll be.
Yeah, your loved one will be sleeping in that grave for the next however many thousands of years. And at some future point, God is going to raise that person up, and then you will be reunited. That just doesn't sound.
It's like press 9, someone will be with you.
What's that?
It's called like press 1, press 2, and you go press 9, and a person will be with you in 20 minutes.
This metaphor is a answering machine.
The answering machine.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I do agree that language. Salvation really comes in the book of Revelation with the second coming of Christ.
But you could point to.
I think
other
so.
things too.
I think so. Right. In the small catechism, we're out of time, so I don't want to take any more.
Interesting stuff.
I like the explanation though of the small K.
Which explanation?
Well, it's simple enough to explain to a child.
Well, that's exactly the point, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
because you mentioned about there not being as much dispute about these things.
Yes.
And maybe it's only theologians who can construct all these different presences.
Well, and again, I went to the Calvin's website. I can't think. I think the Calvin's Catechism is called the Westminster. I think it's called Westminster Confession. I'm not sure. And I went to find places just like this. And again, I couldn't see the difference. The description of why, how does the bread and wine work? It's the same language as the Westminster Confession and the Small Catechism. The important thing, though, I think, and we've really hit on this already today, the real issue is we receive forgiveness of sins. My blood, which is shed for you for the remission of sins. What's the benefit of such eating and drinking? For the remission of sins. Namely, that in the sacrament, forgiveness of sins, life and salvation are given us through these words. For where there is forgiveness, there is life. How that first paragraph ends. I guess one more thing, I'm pushing this a little bit, I guess, but who receives the sacrament worthily? This is probably not a question that a Lutheran would raise, but Catholics raise it all the time. You have to go to confession before you go to communion in their system. And they mean go to confession. They mean you've got to show up at church and talk to the priest, and then you can commune the next Sunday. Well, do we have such a thought? And the answer is a little bit more no than yes, but it is a little bit yes.
We do.
Notice that's right. Notice whenever we do communion, we slip in a public confession first.
Always.
So it's not that we completely ignore this thought, But we don't assume that, not only most, but I would imagine Pastor Menser can probably count on his hands, one hand, the number of times someone has come to him for private confession. It is definitely possible you'll see it, we're going to get to it. But we generally don't do private confession. But anyway, that's the receive the sacrament worthily idea. But the Lutheran answer is, I don't know whether I want to state it in the positive or the negative. I can state it in either. None of us are worthy. It's a gift. Forgiveness is a gift. So I could flip it around and just say, well, we're all worthy because Christ makes us worthy by giving us the gift. I'm not sure if I like the positive or the negative version of that, but it is true. We don't concentrate on how do you make yourself ready for communion, right? We just go to communion. But you can understand the question, except in Lutheran theology, Christ makes us worthy. We don't make ourselves worthy anyway. So if there was something you could do, that would be a work. We don't trust works.
Right.
End of story. That's what that's about. Now, is it useful to confess? Yes, it's useful to confess. Is it useful? He says, is there fasting and bodily preparation? Is that wrong? No, there's nothing wrong with discipline. You can do whatever practices you want. Just don't confuse what you're doing. You're not making yourself worthy for Christ's gift. That's what that's about. Anyway, I think we are going to end. I'm going to call up the Lord's Prayer because that's how we end. So let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So I'm going to end the share.
In my quick Googling of Calvin versus Luther, the last paragraph he had there about the small con
Oh,
articles
that's a different, the reason
and the true body and blood of Christ. Well, Calvin would say that if you're an unbeliever, you don't get the true body and blood.
because you don't have the spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get into that. There is a line in the teaching about non-believers who participate in sacraments. We think about that and say that who would do that?
Right.
But you could imagine maybe at a community.
That was a big deal in the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church.
If you go to church and everybody else is going up to the altar, might you go up to the altar just so you don't bring attention to yourself? You could understand that. Well, anyway, there's a line in the text that says about you are bringing damnation on yourself. Now,
that was big in the Missouri Synod.
Yeah, yes.
You know, don't commune and you're also going to be damned.
You'll be yeah. Now, let me tell you. Now, remember, I'm one of those liberal ELCA Lutherans. Here's my thinking of this. A non-believer who takes part in an activity, any activity, but definitely a faith activity, if they don't believe, they are outside of what's going on there. Nothing happens there.
Yeah.
So in the case of a non-believer, we're saying, well, then you didn't get any forgiveness, because we give forgiveness in communion. since you aren't a believer, you have no faith, you don't get any forgiveness.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to that person? This is the person who is outside of Christ. What we're saying is, well, you stay outside of Christ.
That's a pretty big penalty.
What is that? Yeah, that's right. What is the penalty for being outside of Christ? Damnation.
Damnation.
Jesus saves you from damnation. If
That's
you,
sort of a passive damnation. It's very similar sort of.
I know.
Because it's an active act.
God doesn't reach out and smite you for going to the wrong communion table, but he also doesn't get, what I'm saying is he doesn't give you the grace if you don't believe it. So you're already condemned. If you want the actual Bible reference, it's John 3:18. Everybody knows John 3:16, but most people don't remember John 3:18, which tells you if you're not a believer, you remain damned.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it, folks.
We need to face reality sometimes.
Yeah, we are done for today. See you all. Have a good week. I'm going to end the meeting. Bye now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Wait.